The photographer Paul Nicolin said he wanted to show people what a starving polar bear really looked like. Sealega Cicadas News. As his boat came around a corner last August, Paul Nicolin spotted what at first looked like a white blanket draped over a rock. And although he kept his distance, it soon became clear the blanket was not actually a blanket at all. It was a polar bear, one Mr. Nicolin thought was surely dead. The polar bear, though, was not dead, at least not yet. And when it managed to stand up, Mr. Nicolin, a visual storyteller, snapped a photo. When he published it on Instagram, the image garnered such a strong response that he knew he needed to return with other members of his conservation organization and the proper filming equipment. Mr. Nicolin, 49, wanted to show people what a starving polar bear really looked like. He wanted to make a scientific data point something real. So he and a small group came back to the spot in the Canadian Arctic archipelago about 2 days later. Then they watched as the polar bear rummaged through a rusted trash can, as it nibbled at an old snowmobile seat, as its eyes turned downcast, its spirit defeated. It rips your heart out of your chest, Mr. Nicolin said in a telephone interview on Sunday. As soon as he did a slow stand on his feet, everybody on the team just started crying. When scientists say bears are going extinct, I want people to realize what it looks like, says photographer Paul Nicolin. pic.twitter.com/Babcock4, National Geographic at Nat Geo Dec. 9, 2017. Last week, Mr. Nicolin, his group Sea Legacy and National Geographic published photos and videos from the encounter. They showed the world the polar bear, stranded on iceless land, its white coat dirtied, its body emaciated, its movements labored. And when the world saw, millions recoiled in heartbroken horror. Inexcusable, wrote one commenter on Instagram. So sad, said many more. What? Several asked, can we do? Experts and environmentalists say the broad answer, however controversial and nuanced it may be, is to reduce the present levels of global greenhouse gas emissions in order to curb global warming. In January, federal wildlife officials issued a report that called climate change the biggest threat to the survival of the polar bear. Polar bears depend on sea ice as a platform for hunting seals. As the planet warms, that ice cover melts earlier and earlier, limiting the amount of time polar bears have to hunt and build up their fat reserves before moving to land. As a result, they can end up skinny and in poor physical health by the end of long ice-free summers. Biologists agree that as ice cover continues to decrease, there will be a significant drop in the polar bear population, which according to federal wildlife officials stands at about 26,000 globally. A 2015 assessment projected a reduction of over 30% in the number of polar bears by 2050. Polar bears are built for a feast or famine type of eating, said Elizabeth Kruger, an Arctic Wildlife Program officer with the World Wildlife Fund. But when that period of fasting gets too long, it can put them on the brink. Polar bears have been labeled threatened under the Endangered Species Act since 2008. They are among the largest members of the bear species and prey heavily on seals. All of which makes the viral images of a Furan Bones polar bear particularly striking. The bear Mr. Nicolin and his team documented was stuck on land, its muscles atrophied by continuing starvation, and apparently on the edge of death. One would have to do a lot of specific investigating to determine the cause of suffering for a particular polar bear, Ms. Kruger said, but what is captured in Mr. Nicolin's photo is one of the ways polar bears die. Most of the feedback Mr. Nicolin has received on social media appears positive, if twined with sadness. The viral video of the polar bear, he noted, has been slowed from normal speed. But he has also received blowback from some who have complained he did not do enough to help. People assume you're just cold-hearted, he said. Of course we're upset. But feeding the polar bear would not only prolong its misery, he said, it would have been illegal. And for me to take a gun up to that polar bear and kill it, now you're looking at jail. This is not the first time a downtrodden polar bear has captured the hearts of humans. After all, they are incredibly charismatic, Ms. Kruger said, and big, white, fluffy creatures. Last year, a polar bear named Pizza garnered the support of millions of people worldwide when animal welfare advocates began a campaign to move the world's saddest polar bear, as he was known, from a mall in southern China, where the bear lived in a glass enclosure. Mr. Nicolin said the polar bear he and his team found was never given a cute human name. But he said everyone on the team called it by the same phrase, the dying polar bear.